Squatch Senior here, getting ready to start day 5 of this teardown. I think the first order of business we're going to get this front cover off. See what the gears look like inside on the timing gears, camshaft, stuff like that. From there, I'll probably go into start the rods and the pistons. We'll get them out of the way. Probably do maybe some blasted gauge if we think they're good, just to kind of get an idea what clearances are. Nothing, probably might be doing a new bearing to grind anyway, but it gives me a good reference if that might be part of my noise. Anyway, we'll get started, get this front cover off. Okay, ready to pull the front cover. All the bolts loose, left 2 in there just till I get things organized here. This thing, I didn't have to pry or anything. It virtually fell off on me as I was taking the bolts out. So sometimes kind of nice when they do that. Let's see what we got underneath here. Splash shield. Looks like normal backlash on the cam gear. I've got some side play on that. That'll have to come off, but I don't really see anything that looks really serious in there to me. I'll tell better when I start taking gears off. Next step, I think I might start popping some rods out, see what that looks like. Okay, before removing pistons, you have a ridge in here from the wear from the rings on the piston. You have to remove that so you can get them pistons out. Otherwise, you could snag a ring on that wear, and that would probably break your ring lands on your piston and stuff like that. To do that, utilize a ridge reamer. It's got 3 guides, 2 roller guides, and then you have a cutter with a bottom guide there. You install that in, making sure that your cutter is below your wear. You expand everything out. It's all in tapered ramps in there. You expand it out so that when you start turning, hopefully that cutter will snag that ridge and start taking it out for you. Okay, you can hear it start to cut in there. It means we're getting into it. So you just continue out with this until you get to the end, until the cutter comes out, and you should be good to go. Okay, got the cutter exposed. I brought her all the way up. I didn't cut that ridge continually all the way around. Like I say, this thing has very little wear. But I feel confident now that that piston should come out without doing any damage. You back it off, you lift it out of there. You can see how it cuts. You can see, and I just don't feel anything. So should not be a problem getting the piston out with that. Anyway, got to do that to all 4 of these, and then we'll flip her over. I can start taking caps loose, stuff like that, and getting these pistons out. Okay, last ridge taken out there. We'll get this out of the way and kind of inspect what we got going on here. It's kind of interesting the way this kind of took the ridge out. On every one of these, it seems like it cut a little heavier to this side. You can see right down in here, there. The other sides don't have near the cut action going on. I'm not sure if we have just the way the piston fires and maybe a little more pressure to that side. Like I say, there was minimal ridge in this thing at all. You can see a number 1 cylinder. You can see part of the iron filings and stuff from cutting the ridge out and stuff. A lot of carbon stuff in there. But anyway, I feel real comfortable. Them pistons will come out without any difficulty. Okay, we've got the fold over locks flattened out. Got the bolts loose. See if we can pop that cap off. See what we look like on a bearing. Okay, the shell looks good from what I can see. No excessive wear. The Babbitt's still on. No, it's not wore down into the liner. I'm going to plastic gauge this and see what I got for clearances. Okay, the plastic gauge I'm using is in the clearance range of 1 to 3 thousandths. It does come in different thicknesses, so you can check for different clearances. When I put this stuff in a bearing, I put just a small amount of grease on the shell. That way it kind of holds the plastic gauge in position as you get everything bolted down. Now when you put this together, you make sure your crank does not turn. You don't want to smudge that plastic gauge. Anyway, I'll get this all put back together, torque it down, and see what we got for a reading. Okay, got the plastic gauge cap torqued down and everything else. What I did, I pulled the insert out of the rod. Usually when I do this, I'll put it on the bottom side so the gravity on the piston pulls down. You get a more accurate reading and stuff. So, and I did pull the insert out, kind of checking to see what I had in there for sizes. On the back side, kind of hard to see, but you can see a .002. So this is a 2/1000 under bearing, which gives me confidence. This crank is pretty close to standard size, so it gives me room for grinding if I need to. Now you can see on this side where the plastic gauge has been squeezed out. On the strip that it comes in, you do have everything here for sizes. What you do, you just do a comparison. Right here, according to this, looks like I got about a 3 thousandths clearance on that side. Probably a 2 thousandths on that side. So anyway, I'm within spec. It should be even all the way across, which makes me think when they did an overhaul on this, they kind of looked at the crank and just put 2 thousandths bearings undersize in there just to get by. So anyway, I'm going to go through the rest of these, check them all out, and see what I have. Now before I start checking clearances on the rest of these, I'm going to start getting these rods out of the block and stuff. Make sure you keep them in order from 1 to 4. All your caps are marked on this one. They got 1, 2, 3, etc. stamped into the end of the rod cap. So that's an indication which way these rods go in a specific way, the pistons go in a specific way, and that way they're already marked for what cylinder they go in and come out of. If they're not marked, I would do, a lot of guys will just do like 1 punch for number 2, 2 punches. If you got a number stamp your numbers in, stuff like that. So now after we got that ridge reamed, we'll see how this piston comes out. Not bad. Slid right out of there. Okay, there's what we got. Pin seems really nice and tight in that. I feel no free play at all. Oil ring, oil control ring, very little wear if any on that. There's some carbon buildup, but you can see a little scuffing. You get that, that's normal. Anyway, that one looks in good shape. We'll do the rest of them. Okay, ready to slide that last piston out. Okay, there she is. That sure makes a big difference when you cut that ridge out of it. You can see how the Rings, when they catch that ridge where it's wore in, it could start breaking these lands out in between the rings and stuff. Don't want that to happen, but let's go over the bench, see what we found. All of Babbitt, all of caps come into spec. Round average 2000s clearance in each one. Spec is .0011 to .0037. I was right about the mid-range, maybe a little tighter on the low end, so which is very good. I see no issues with pins being loose or anything. They're all nice and tight. And I did find an issue with number 3. Don't know how this happened. You can see how it's scored. It's got all the rings froze up, everything. Could be a very possible area where that knock was coming from. Let's hope I don't find anything else. Got to get into the cam and stuff yet and get that pulled out, and we'll see what that looks like before I go any farther. I do have to get the cam out of the way before I get into taking the crank out, so let's get started on the cam. Okay, ready to remove the camshaft here. First thing I'm going to do is check the end play before I take anything loose. I got the dial indicator set up with a magnetic base, got her zeroed out. We'll see what we're reading here. Okay, about 6 thousandths end play. Recommended spec is 3 to 11, so I would say I'm probably to the lower end of end play. That is very good on them bearings there. So let's get this out of the way. One thing I did notice, it seems like this is good on the slack, free play, backlash you get, you call it, but up and down. So I think that bearing's a little loose. You can feel quite a bit of up and down movement in there. So we'll see what the bearings are like when we get that off. To take this out, there is access holes in the front. Move the camera around here so we can see. In here you turn, there's access holes. There's two bolts to hold the thrust plate on. So you take them out, you turn this to get access to the other one. You can slide the cam right out. As you can see, I need to get this cam out of the way, I need to get the idler gear out of the way, and I need to get this front plate out of the way before I can lift that crank out of there. I have noticed, I'm not sure if you guys know anything, maybe you can enlighten me on this, but inside the front cover, I'm not sure if that's wear marks, if that's been machined. Now I see no indication that this cam gear has been wearing. You can still see all the machining marks on the end of the teeth. See no shiny spots. You can see a little bit of rust there that hasn't been worn off. If that had been rubbing, that rust would have been gone. So I don't think this cam gear hitting that front case is my knock issue. I'm leaning towards number 3 piston right now, but we'll get this out, take a look at her, and see what we got. Okay, I've got the bolts off the thrust plate on the cam. Got this one loose on the idler gear. Let's take that idler gear off first. We're loose with everything. Well, now let's see if we can get that cam loosened up and out of here. All the tappets are down, so I should have clearance without any of the lobes or the cam bearings snagging on the tappets. You gotta be pretty careful doing this. You don't want to. Coming apart isn't so bad if you're going to replace cam bearings, but if you plan on using them again, you don't want to scar them. That's Babbitt's pretty easy to scar on there, so you got to take it pretty easy coming out. Well, so far it's coming easy. Just want to take your time with this, just work it out slowly. As you can see, as the cam comes out, your front bearing is the biggest. As you go back, they step down in size, so it does make it easier to pull out, and it gives you the clearance needed to get her out of there. Okay, just a quick look at her. I don't see any serious issues. This cam gear is pressed on, so unless there's an issue that has to be replaced or whatever, we'll just leave that all together as a unit. Quick look at the bearings. I've got a little scarring on that one. I don't know if somebody had been in here before, but we'll get to, I think we're going to need bearings for sure. Not sure if you guys can see it or not, but if you look down here, you can definitely feel it with your finger. Back up in this way, but yeah, there's your oil hole or your oil feed hole. I don't know if there's some dirt in there that got in and scratched her, but I'll definitely be putting cam bearings in. Okay, next thing, I can get this front plate off, and then start working on that crankshaft. One interesting thing too I found on the camshaft thrust bearing, the bolts holding that on, both had paint. You know, I don't like bolts with paint on. I mean, it might be negligible. That could flake off, start plugging up oil pump, maybe even cause a cam bearing failure like that. So I'm pretty fussy. I don't put anything with paint on the inside. It's an exterior type paint. So definitely this thing has been apart on the camshaft area before. And I can see on some of the fold down locks here, this front plate has been off before. So yeah, this thing has been worked on in the past. Okay, here's a classic example of why you should not reuse fold over locks. You can see how that one's all beat up. That just happened between, I don't know how many times been folded over, but you weaken that crimp. These are a very easy one to make, really. All it is a flat piece of steel. You drill your hole. You do your flat, which goes into the slots or whatever they have for them, and you fold it over. I mean, it's no big issue to even make them. I've made a lot of fold over locks. That's no big deal there. As you can see, when I took one apart, it basically totally disintegrated on me. It come right apart on me. So yeah, it's pretty important not to reuse them fold over locks. I kind of like to put new ones in every time I'm doing that. So anyway, let's see if we can get this front cover off. It'll be a little more difficult in this one. Let's see, we do have alignment dowel pins. I'll show you a little trick I got. I got to round up some tools here first. Okay, a lot of times what I'll do, I'll take these old knives. Instead of taking a screwdriver and trying to pry stuff apart, I'll just take them in here and I'll just kind of hammer them in. That starts getting me loose. See how that works? You don't damage any gasket surfaces or anything. This one's a little tighter here, but you can just kind of work them down. So anyway, I kind of saved the old knives. It kind of worked pretty good. So anyway, I'll work this around, see if we can get this loose. Looks like they got her pretty well glued on here. I think that dowel pin is holding me back a little bit. The dowel pin's holding me now. There we go. Yeah, she's glued on pretty good. You can see where she really pulled on the gasket. Okay, ready to get started on the crankshaft. 3 main bearings, all held in safety wire. There's holes through the heads of the bolts. Safety wire holds them in case something comes loose, they won't spin out on you. The thrust is taken up on this on the center main. You'll have thrust areas on your center bearing here that controls end play. I do have my dial indicator set up again on the magnetic base. Got it zeroed out, and we'll see what our end play is. Okay, looks like we're running. We'll do a few times. We're back to 0. We're going about 5 thousandths. End play specifications are 4 to 8. So again, I'm on the low end of specs. This thing is really speccing out good. And so far, the only thing I can really find is that scored number 3 piston, a possible loose cam bearing, and a starter nose cone piece lodged against the flywheels that's spinning. So we're working her down there, slow but sure. We'll start taking the main caps off and see what we got for bearings in there. See if we find any issues. Okay, I've got the safety wires off the bolts, all of them loose. I've pulled the center main out with the thrust on. You can see a little bit of flaking starting to go on here. There's kind of peel loose. Thrust was good on her. As I'd mentioned before, you should, if you don't see any indicators on these, to mark them. Well, the rod caps were numbered 1 through 4. I see somebody's been into this, and what they did, you can see the punch marks, 2 punch marks. Here you got 1 here and 1 here. 2, and here they put 3 of them up here with 3 of them down here. So that gives you the proper location and position of these caps, so you get them back in. Reason for that is when this was put together, this thing was line bored all the way through, so everything was on one single plane. And if you start switching these around end for end, whatever, you're going to throw your whole geometry of this block off, and your crank is very likely to bind on you and wipe some bearings out. So that's one important thing. Make sure these get back in the same position and location they were in before. So my next step here is I'm going to do some clearance checks on these. We'll do some plastic gauge, see how that clearance is spec out. So far I've been impressed with this engine for being in spec and everything so far. I'm going to pull a few more of these out and have a look at them. Not too bad. I don't see anything really wore through real bad on that one. And that one either isn't looking horrendous. On here you can see some scoring and stuff. That's kind of normal wear. You'll see that a lot of times. Picked up a little piece of something. The reason for Babbitt is that the Babbitt, anything micrometer like microscopic, will embed in the Babbitt and basically will not hurt your crank. That's the purpose of Babbitt. So anyway, I'm going to do some plastic gauge on these, see what the clearances are before I pull the crank, just to kind of get an idea what I got. That one's not bad, but you can feel some wear on the center main here, so I'm pretty sure this crank is going to be a candidate for grinding, get her all polished up and back into spec where it should be. Okay, get everything plastic gauged, ready to take the last main cap off, and we'll see what we have. Okay, I started out with the rear main. I used a 1 to 3 thousandths plastic gauge, and I come up with just reading. You can see all the scales they put on here. It gives you pretty accurate. I trust them. Some guys say they don't trust them, but I do trust them. I've never had a problem, so I guess I can keep trusting. Anyway, I started out with a green on a 1 to 3, and I'm averaging about 3 thousandths on the rear. From there I went up to the red, which is a 2 to 6 thousandths clearance, and reading here, I'm probably like 3 thousandths, I'd say, by the gauge on that one. And up here, that's about a 4. It all depends where my wear is here. I'm running from 4 to about a 3, right in that area right there. So anyway, that's what we ended up with. We're in spec, but it's I don't like when you start running into this kind of stuff. You can feel a definite wear pattern in this front one. So definitely this crank will be ground. That's probably going to end this series right now. Don't have to really watch me pull this crank out. I'm going to have to wait for my helper anyway. But I feel confident that it was a good idea to tear this engine down, especially with number 3 cylinder being scored. the condition of the flywheel and the clutch, the pieces on the inside of the bell housing wearing on that flywheel, the way this thing has been dripping oil all over. Hopefully we can get some of them oil leaks sealed up and stuff. So yeah, I believe it was the right thing to do to tear this engine down. What I'll probably be doing next, I'll start cleaning up parts. We'll get this crank out, get that cleaned up. I'll do some miking and stuff and make sure. I'm hoping a 10 thousandths grind will do it on that. Start getting some parts ordered, stuff like that. Anyway, it might be a few days or even a week or so before I even get back into doing any more of this stuff. So stay tuned.